So it's now 2 minutes past 5 according to my phone, just coming up to. So it gives me very great pleasure today to bring District 71 this webinar on building and sustaining vibrant Toastmasters programs and corporations. The presenter is the author of the book. The presenter is Pat Johnson, a distinguished Toastmaster and a past international president of Toastmasters International. And I believe, Pat, you were the 5th ever lady to be in the top job for Toastmasters International. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Oh, wow. There we go. So, dear attendees, if I could ask you to listen to Pat, and then if you have questions, jot them down in the questions panel below, and then I will endeavour to pick them up as part of the discussion at the end of the call. We are recording this call and we will share it with those that haven't been able to attend via the district website and YouTube channel. So with that, I give the call to Pat Johnson.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Daniel and District 71, for inviting me to participate in your webinar series and to talk about something that I'm so passionate about. And also welcome to other European Toastmasters that may be joining us today. First of all, just a very brief background, how I came about writing this book and changing my personal approach to how I built Toastmasters in the corporate world. I worked as the manager and the assistant director for training and development in corporations. So I worked in a couple of corporations and large government agencies, all of which were implementing Toastmaster clubs. And I watched their inability to sustain themselves over a long period of time. I watched the efforts of usually one single person who had been the spark plug to get that club going in a corporation, end up endlessly having to recruit people and be the backbone of the club until they either left that workplace or tired out and quit, and then the club would fail. So I looked at also the lack of participation that was often visible from the members of the corporate clubs, and that they weren't showing up for officer training or participating in other events. Now, this varied from club to club, but there was a gap there in my research. I also looked at the program quality and said, is this something that when I was sitting in my director's role at work that I would actually pay money for? Was there a great perceived value that was being presented in the corporate world? And if my CEO, if the chief executive officer was standing in the doorway of the Toastmasters club meeting every week, would they perceive that there was value happening? The other thing that I realized is that the way we marketed and the way that I had marketed in the past Toastmasters, that I would likely not buy and bring in Toastmasters into the corporate world where I was responsible for the deliverables to my CEO. And so that I would need to know, as that director of the program, what was happening in that training program and the deliverables. So I found a huge number of gaps, and it caused me to go back and explore the way I had started years ago, creating Toastmaster programs, not clubs, but programs in corporations. So the first great challenge of this whole concept is to wipe your mind of anything you know about how clubs are formed, how they work, and how Toastmasters clubs exist. So that's the biggest challenge to begin with, is to forget that you know anything about Toastmasters. And then let's flip the page over and start on a brand new page. And I would like to introduce you to Toastmaster programs in corporations. And what would that look like? Well, I built the ideas around what I would look for when I sat in that decision-making chair in the corporations. So first of all, I wanted them, really importantly, I wanted them to not talk jargon. And I wanted to talk, the person that came in from Toastmasters to be professional and to reflect somebody who I would consider hiring as a contractor or as a consultant. So I didn't want them to arrive in their regalia of Toastmasters and start talking about what life-changing events it was for them and their icebreaker and the Pathways program. All of that would mean nothing to me as a non-Toastmaster. I wanted them to be curious about what I needed and to make an attempt to fit into how I ran the business already. So given that you have wiped your mind of all the things that you know Toastmasters, we can start and look. First of all, let's look at language. We want to talk language of the corporate world, and this may be different in different countries, so you need to look at adaptability of this. But certainly for the most part in North America, we need to talk about when we go to education organizations and take a program, which is exactly what Toastmasters is. We are an education organization. We pay tuition. So when we go to university, we go to college, we go to private school, we pay tuition. So we talk to the corporation about the tuition and the fees for the corporate program. We talk about learning objectives and the curriculum. We don't necessarily talk about pathways because they don't care what the name of the program is or the vehicle that it's being used to deliver, but they want to know about the curriculum. So we talk about curriculum. Club officers and club officer training all becomes irrelevant because we're not talking about clubs anymore. We're talking about professional communication and leadership training program that we can offer that curriculum to the corporation. So when we talk about those roles within the program that look like leadership roles, that's what we call them. We call them leadership opportunities or leadership roles, so that when people are interested in leadership and they sign up for communication and leadership and they say, I want to take an extra role in leadership, then we look at them taking on the executive roles. And we don't necessarily call them executive again, because that may mean something in the corporation. So we have to really watch that we're not duplicating what exists in the corporation's structure. Really, when we look at the major components of the Toastmasters program or curriculum, we find that formal presentations is valuable in the workplace, and they would be interested in that. They would be very interested, from my experience, to buy listening skills and thinking skills. I found those most difficult to find. Something that could teach listening skills and thinking skills in the workplace, both which are critically needed and very, very difficult to find, particularly in experiential learning. So I talk about the communication being listening, thinking, and then speaking. Talk about the informal and formal presentations that we teach people to do, and particularly the feedback, which is highly desirable for any workplace that's working with supervisors and managers, interpersonal communication, meeting management, those types of interactions where we need personal communication skills and evaluation skills or feedback skills. So those become highly desirable. I do not call in a corporate environment, I do not call the Toastmaster program sessions a meeting. Most of us that have spent our life in corporate world or in the business world do not want to go to another meeting. And there's a different connotation to the word meetings in the corporate world. So we want to use the word sessions, running program sessions, Toastmaster program sessions. Talking about the participants rather than members, because when people sign up for training, they're usually called students or participants and not members, because again, there's a tie back to the club in that. So those are just some of the language changes that will help you when you first contact a corporation about them being interested in bringing in the Toastmasters curriculum. So look at that. So when I first contact a corporation, the first thing I do is I want to find out how they run their educational programs internally. So I ask questions like, do you have a training department? Does all your training run through your training department? How do you advertise your training events? Are they rotated on a regular basis? How are your employees funded to go to training for personal and professional development? Are there certain hours allocated to each employee within a year for their personal and professional development relating to their work? How do you have it set up so that supervisors that identify training needs within their employees can register them for training? So I want to find out how they run their training department so I know how we can fit in with our curriculum. So when I find out those things, and I also ask if they're available if they have firewalls that would prevent their participants from accessing our online curriculum. And because in some cases, corporations will have to have those firewalls adapted or removed for their participants to have access. I also talk to the corporation very briefly, but I do cover the fact that Toastmasters is built on adult education principles. All the exercises that we do are based on objectives, so we work to objectives, that there's evaluation and follow-up, which creates accountability in each of the projects. A couple of other things that I do share right away with the corporation so that they understand how the Toastmasters corporate program will be slightly different than other programs that they run. If, for example, someone goes to project management, they would be expected to go perhaps for 3 or 4 days or 1 day, whatever the case might be, and then they're finished. Well, Toastmasters is very different than that because we're an experiential, self-paced learning program. And that means that a person may set their own pace, but perhaps the supervisor or the corporation wants to have some expectations in terms of what will be achieved during that period of enrollment in that program. And what would that look like? So it's self-paced program and it's experiential learning, which explains to them that things are going to take a bit longer when we do experiential learning. We learn from peers as well as senior people aware of the curriculum in Toastmasters. But that experiential learning gives them that they walk out of that training program with skills in place, not just knowledge, but that they've developed specific skills. I talk about also to them that there's a team environment in the learning, so people have access to learning about teams and how to work on teams to set goals together and to achieve goals by inspiring and motivating one another. talk to them about the course material is provided and that we would work with them to get it integrated into their corporation, and that evaluation criteria for each of the projects is also provided so that the curriculum comes as a complete package, that they don't need to have concerns about the completeness of the package. That there is local and international support for the corporate program, and that there is no pass or fail in Toastmasters, that people are there to learn starting where they are and continuing to where they want to go. And that if there is a set limit of time and support from the corporation with this specific program, that the employees have an opportunity that if, for example, the corporation says we'll support an individual in their participation in this experiential learning for a maximum of 2 years in terms of their time from work and their tuition, that then there is a structure outside of the corporate world where people that have been involved in the program could then transfer out to a slightly different environment, but that they could continue on in their Toastmaster learning and leadership development if they wish to do so. So those are the things that I talk to the corporation about right up front. I'm curious about what component of their corporation they want to make the training available to, and it doesn't really matter, but I want them to think about it and how they would do that. The other thing is when I find out how they do their training, I ask if they send their people to training during work hours or if people are expected to do their development work outside of work hours. And if they say that employees are given time during work to do their development training, then I ask them what day and what time they would implement for a consistent delivery of the Toastmasters program. And I would basically suggest Tuesdays at 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock, or perhaps Wednesday mornings from 10 till 11. And I would, with the intention of implementing it into this is paid work time while you're at Toastmasters. I find that for the most part, we marginalize Toastmasters in the corporate world, and we do it. We do it to ourselves by offering to do it at noon hour or after work or in the morning before work starts. And I think that sets us up for a certain amount of failure and difficult buy-in from employees who may access this through their supervisors or their own volition to develop communication and leadership. So I think when we value our program, we ask for that training slot during the training days, because in my experience, there's training that goes on every day in a corporation all day long. And there's no reason why the Toastmasters program should not be in there. I think that also drives the importance to look at the agenda of that training session and to ensure that there's quality happening in it every time. So it brings us, and I've given an example in my handbook about an agenda, and it's on page 81 for anybody that has access to the handbook. So it basically is looking at really getting it clear and concise and quick and efficient to get through this meeting. It's also looking at adding an education moment or component, so that we need to have a district liaison or a corporate liaison that is present at these meetings. If the mentor and sponsor are finished, we need to have a Toastmaster presence because we have a unique delivery method in Toastmasters. And so who's going to ensure that the delivery is in integrity with the Toastmasters program. So there's a need, in my opinion, to have some access there to be involved. The tendency sometimes over time is for an organization to want to take over Toastmasters at the Toastmasters program. And my experience of this is that they then run it not like Toastmasters. They don't run it as a Toastmasters program. They don't understand the access to the world of Toastmasters. And it turns into a very insular public speaking group. And that's not what Toastmasters is about. So I have some cautions around that. And I've had some experiences with that. So I don't recommend that, although I'm very interested if people have had other experiences. A couple of things to look at when you approach a corporation to help with the success of it is if you can find a corporate champion who will support and host the program internally, that's fabulous, because they can be the connection between the corporation and Toastmasters International. And ideally, they sit at the corporate board table where they can represent the value that the Toastmasters program brings, make sure it's funded next year, and even perhaps keep it visible to the leadership in the corporation. However, Toastmasters as a program can exist quite well without that role if we are fully integrated in doing business with the training department or the HR department, whoever runs training in their corporation. And that's where our real main focus comes from. So basically, when we go in with our paperwork, we're writing a contract to provide them with curriculum and guidance on the delivery of that curriculum. When I don't talk to them about mentors and sponsors, but I talk to them about people being there as resources to provide expertise. And I really believe that mentors or sponsors need to be there for 6 months. You've got 25, 30 brand new people at a minimum in that room, and you need those sponsors there to start and share knowledge, to mentor people who are new in this program that are trying to figure out how to put together a presentation, trying to figure out how to do impromptu speaking, trying to figure out how to manage a meeting management that they've never done before in the way that we do it, and all the timing elements. So, and identifying the leaders that will take on those leadership roles to be to access that opportunity within the program. So a lot of resources needed. So sponsors to stay for a minimum of 6 months, and mentors to stay for a minimum of 1 year. Toastmasters program works on an annual cycle. And if we don't stay with them for a year, we've abandoned them before they figure out what a proxy means. This is often new language and not something that they would get in any other program at work. And so that it's an extra element that they can learn that transfers into their real world. How does a proxy work? What's a delegate? What do you mean we review bylaws and submit and send votes in? So belonging to an organization where you do that is another learning experience for them, but they need coaching and support in knowing how to do that. Also, when the leadership changes in that program, how does that happen? Who talks about it? Who provides the continuity of building succession in leaders to talk about the skills and the transferable skills and exposure that they'll get from taking on a leadership role in the program, and the access to the corporation that they could have in those roles? So there's so many things that need to be managed in terms of extra benefits from the Toastmasters program that just are beyond getting up and giving a speech, getting feedback, and doing impromptu speaking. So it's all that extra leadership opportunity outside of Toastmasters, outside of that corporate environment that they really need to be supported in going to and accessing. One of the other things that I say right up front when I'm dealing with that they decide that they're going to bring in and create a Toastmasters program is that I talk about the leaders. No leader that I know of has gained all their information and everything they needed to know how to be a leader at one place at one time. In other words, many people in leadership, myself included, took courses on the side. We went and perhaps paid to take a course that filled a gap that we needed in our learning. We went and went to events on weekends because it extended our learning. And therefore, I talk about that and say that twice a year that they will be expected as leaders to attend leadership training. It will be sponsored by the Toastmasters organization, but they are required to attend. If they're going to be leaders, that they need to go to leadership training. It'll be held on a Saturday in most cases. Sometimes it's held in the evening, but it is a requirement that if they take on a leadership role, that they behave like a leader and show up with their responsibilities taken seriously. So I'm pretty upfront. I don't whitewash it. I don't make it sound like it's a cakewalk or that this is all easy and everybody will flock to this. I'm very realistic with them because I think that that's what leads to success. To begin as I intend to continue with them. So set our expectations as an international organization and what they need to do to partner with us, and we state what we're willing to do for them. So we want our program to be integrated into their training format. If they run a training program calendar, we want Toastmasters to be integrated into that. And then we need to work with them to figure out how they deal with enrollment and how they deal with the payments. And that's going to be very specific to each organization because I'll have different ways of doing it. So be curious and work with them because they'll have the answers of how it happens. We don't have to have the answers. They figure out the answer that works for them. How will they pay for it? How will this be renewed on a regular basis when renewals come through? And to explain that process, that people need to pay an initiation fee to get implemented into the system to have access to the curriculum. Now, for me, I don't worry greatly in a corporate program to have a banner and to have a lot of the Toastmaster regalia. I would like to have a gavel. I would like to have some materials, certainly access and some feedback sheets for them, but I don't worry a lot about them having a banner unless that's something that they really relate to. But it would be highly unlikely in a corporate program to walk in and have a banner posted for the program. And on the other hand, if that's what can happen and wouldn't be weird in your environment, then I would say do it. So I think that covers a lot of the basic stuff up front. When we are just to look at doing an information or a demonstration meeting, when you talk to the corporation and you ask them if they would like to have an information meeting or a demonstration meeting to illustrate how the program would actually work, a lot of corporations, in my experience, invite their vice presidents and their managers and supervisors to see how it works because then they know who to recommend in their staff to attend the training. And they then understand how the training in the room with employees who might want to come, because the employee might say yes and the supervisor would say no because their performance isn't up to snuff in their current work. So I would, in doing the demonstration meeting, I would highly recommend Rick Furbush's demonstration meeting. And you can find Rick, and his name is spelled R-I-C-K, and Furbush is F-U-R-B-U-S-H. Rick is on YouTube, and his demo meeting, you can do a demonstration meeting with 2 or 3 people, and that's what you want to do. You don't want to bring a whole host of people who are then going to talk about all their personal experiences and how wonderful and how they love everybody in Toastmasters and they found their family. That's inappropriate for the workplace and what we're doing at this time. So Rick's model uses very few people, but what I love about that system is that it puts the participants who have come to see in the experiential seat. So if I'm running the demo meeting or the information meeting, I have them share ideas. They do table topics. So one of us leads it, but they do the table topics and they get to experience it. I ask them to give feedback on the speaker, to share their impressions so that they're giving evaluation and they experience what it's like to be called on to do that. So getting them a taste of the experiential learning and the program is magical for me from my perspective. And I find that enrolls people so quickly into the Toastmasters program. I think a couple of other things that would be very valuable to have within the structure of a corporation to sustain a vibrant program. First of all, if it's set up, as I've described, integrated into the training programs of the corporation, then I think to ask for it to also be part of the performance review plan. And I've also given an example in the handbook of a letter of agreement for learning that I personally used. It's on page 85. I personally used this with my employees who wanted to attend Toastmasters. And so I had an expectation in my performance review, if I was funding them and giving them time from work to go to a program, I wanted to know what they were doing, what were their deliverables for me to feel satisfied. And then I would review that with them at our 6-month review of their performance. So I had an expectation in terms of their attendance and their consistency of attendance. I also had an expectation if they were one of the leaders in that program that they would participate in the leadership meetings or the executive meetings of that program, so as they learn to lead, and that they would go to leadership training that was offered by the district. So it covers and makes accountability. This was a huge issue in corporations from my experience, that there was no accountability and people would sign up and then not show up and nobody cared or nobody reported. And if the CEO came along and said, looked in the door and there were 10 people there and they were paying for 30, they might be curious why and where the 20 other ones were, and if we didn't have any accountability. So when I ran a department in training and development, one of the things that we always had was attendance sheets. And so I wanted to know who was in a program and who missed and why they were away. So in some cases, at the beginning of the program, we would actually see if everybody was in attendance. And if they weren't there, we would phone their supervisor and ask them where they were. So sometimes we were told they'd been pulled off to go to another meeting. Sometimes we were told that they were sick that day, so we knew not to expect them. But there was accountability. Now, I'm not saying that we do it to that level, but if we take attendance at those Toastmaster program sessions then we've got some accountability and we keep those records. Those records become vital to reporting back, because as Toastmasters International and the service provider of the curriculum, we need to report back to the corporation, whether it's the training or HR department and or the corporate sponsor, in terms of who's doing what is the attendance rate, who hasn't been attending at all. So report out the data so that there's some accountability, because we as Toastmasters are the provider of the curriculum. We're not the disciplinarians, but we need to report to the corporation because they're paying time and money for these people to attend. And they want to know because they'll track it. It's important information for them. So those are a couple of things to look at in terms of creating, sustaining that club. When we, looking at sustaining the club just for a few minutes before I go to questions. When you've got an existing club program, if you set it up as a Toastmaster program as described, and you're doing check-ins, I would suggest the first year at least quarterly, and then you may, if they agree, go to semi-annually, but they may want a quarterly report. So ask them what they want. We don't have to have the answers. We need to do business with them, and we're partnering with the corporation, and that is so important to work in cooperation with them and see how it works for them. So we've got the performance review plans. We want to look also at, for accountability and exposure, do they have anything, people that are recognized for education in any way? So can our Toastmaster graduates or members or participants be recognized in any way in the corporation? And is there a way that the Toastmasters program or other training programs are advertised within the corporation? Is it a published calendar? Do they do a revolving screen on people's intranet? How do they advertise upcoming programs and therefore the Toastmasters program that would be coming up? One of the things you want to have in your back pocket for sure when you go to the information meeting is the real good knowledge of the skills and knowledge that the corporation might want from the Toastmasters program. So meeting management would be one, interpersonal skills, setting and managing goals, organizational knowledge, presentation skills, exposure to good PowerPoint, critical thinking, teamwork, feedback or evaluation skills, management training. So there's a lot of management skills in the Toastmasters program, learning accountability in a team environment, relying, holding one another accountable, critical thinking, and then leadership experiential training, which is very difficult to find from the experiential perspective. So those are some of the skills and knowledge that you might look at that are transferable from the Toastmasters, and you may have another list as well. Just thinking about what to cover next. I think let's look at very briefly at what the district can do to support this. If we look at the nothing existing and how do we build a support network for something so different, so unique, first of all, we have to find people that are familiar with the corporate environment who are able to forget what they already know about Toastmasters and are willing to start from scratch and look at how to build a Toastmasters program. Those people could become part of a district corporate team and become liaisons, resources to those corporate programs and train the area division leaders to speak the language and not confuse the corporate programs when they go in to visit. Now, in some cases, there may be a challenge to get into the corporation, but there shouldn't be if you set it up at the beginning that you're part of a global organization. This program will be reviewed for integrity purposes by leaders that are at an area or division level. So set it up, let them know what's going to happen in their corporate world so that there's permission to do that, because it is part of the structure. And it also gives access to explain to the leaders within that program that these are leadership roles that are available to them if they should decide to expand beyond the local area. So that is, so looking at further to the district structure. So if you're training people to talk the language, to understand the processes and the format being very different, the relationships, and that
Pat, are you still online? It looks like Pat Johnson has lost connection. We'll see if she can regain the connection. If any of you got any questions, you can type them in and I can have them ready. Pat, you back?
Okay, great. I don't know where I lost you.
You were in the middle of district programs and you just finished making the point about that district leadership roles are available to their employees should they wish to venture outside of their company.
Okay. So looking at district support for the Toastmaster program. And thanks, Daniel. The other things that I would look at from the district perspective is you have your TLIs or your club officer training, that you develop a component of that event for corporate leadership training, because they're not going to find any relevance from the regular officer training because they're not going to have those roles. They don't need a VP of membership. They need a membership liaison with the corporation to ensure that the corporation is enrolling people in the program. But we don't need to run a club membership drive. That's not how it works in the corporate world. We don't, as participants in a program in the corporate world, we don't go and recruit participants. The corporation sends the participants because they recognize that it's a quality program and that there's needs in their environment. So that's what's really important and very different here. So we need the corporate liaison team to really understand that at the district level, and troubleshooting opportunities for those Toastmaster programs so that we can keep them vibrant and thriving. And sometimes that means that we need to go in and resell the Toastmasters corporate program and remove a club, a community club, that we've built in an organization that may not be working. So there's a fair amount of work and involvement in this that really takes that mind shift, that paradigm shift to another level at the district for them to support a different program happening in their midst. A number of things that I've done at officer training events for corporates is I've held a workshop for them to brainstorm and troubleshoot what's not working. I've done information sessions for them where they come and talk about it and how they can rebuild it in a different way and talk about what they need for accountability, etc. So there's a number of things that you can do immediately to support those corporate Toastmaster programs if they're built that way. So I think I'll stop because I could go on for a couple of hours here, but I want to stop and see if there's questions. I don't have access to the chat questions, so I'll rely on Daniel here if there's any questions, Daniel.
Yes, the questions have started to come in.
Okay.
I will kick off with one of my own. Occasionally I get asked if Toastmasters programs qualify members for their continuous professional development credits that a lot of professional organisations run in the UK. Do you think that's a line that I should pursue to see if there's any professional bodies prepared to recognise Toastmasters programs?
That's a very good question, and that's a question that we've grappled with at board level for a number of years, looking at accreditation. There are some professional organizations that do recognize Toastmasters, at least in North America, but for the most part, my understanding is that they're one-offs. So you could definitely investigate if that is. I know that some of our accounting programs in North America recognize Toastmasters as part of the communication component, but it may take a lot of resources to do that. So it might be a HPL for somebody. So I'll leave it at that. I don't believe that Toastmasters International has a list of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And the next question comes up from Elizabeth Jordan, who's my club quality chair, looking after mentors, coaches, and retention.
Mm-hmm.
The trend in the corporate world is to provide online training such as lynda.com, now LinkedIn Learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How will you convince them to run an experiential Toastmasters program?
Well, I don't find that I try to convince them of anything, first of all. So it's my approach. I present them a phenomenal opportunity that I want to enroll them in. And we had this also, the very same thing in the corporate world where I worked. And what I talk about is everybody has different learning styles, and that what we're talking about here is not knowledge transfer, which is what lynda.com is. That's what online learning is it's a knowledge transfer. We're talking about developing skills. You cannot learn to present by reading a screen or reading a book or having someone tell you how to do it. You must do it and get feedback. So that's the major component that makes Toastmasters such a unique program, is that it's experiential learning and that you get immediate feedback on what everything you do. And that when people walk out of there, they're not talking knowledge that's going to be forgotten in a week or 2 months. They've got a skill that they're building. When you look at knowledge and what we know and how the brain works, that it's actually documented in some some research that within 24 hours of reading or hearing something, that people forget 50% of it. That's a pretty poor return rate for a corporation in giving time and money towards something. And it's easy to push people off onto lynda.com. But that doesn't meet everybody's needs. That's not how you learn to present. That's not how you develop interpersonal. That's not how you change the morale of an organization or build leaders. So I just talk about the transferable skills, the different learning styles of people, and the skill building focus versus knowledge push.
Excellent. I think I can attest to most of my online refresher training barely touching the sides.
Yes.
I got a question now from Judy Beretta, who's from Toast UK, a corporate at Gilead Sciences. Her question is, should there be a different visit report from the district leader for corporate clubs? I think the area director's visit report, I think we're talking to.
Well, I think you probably need to adapt it. Toastmasters International is not at that place. So while we have 1 foot on the boat and 1 foot on the dock, and we're making it up as we go along. So Toastmasters has not designed a report for corporate programs. A lot of people in the world of Toastmasters haven't got their head around that this is a totally different animal and runs differently. Yeah, the paperwork's not there. So do what you can with what you've got and adapt it. And where there's remark places and spaces, add your comments to what works and how the program is being integrated through that. Yeah, so an opportunity to be creative and innovative.
Yes, that makes a lot of pragmatic sense. And now I've got a question from our district director, John Cox. His question is, what do you suggest is the best way of approaching a potential organisation? Any tips for getting to that right person?
I wouldn't worry about getting to the right person. I would phone an organization and start by asking to speak to someone in the training department or HR, unless you have a lead already that takes you to a senior executive, and then that would open the doors. But I would approach it, remember, we're the consultant, we're the contractor, so I would approach it just like doing a cold call as a consultant. And if I'm taking a training program, my most likely place of contact, and certainly when I was sitting in that chair in the corporation, I had people every week coming and asking to meet with me, walking in the organization, phoning and asking to meet with me to talk about programs. So things that they could offer our learning to our employees. So that's where I would start, because they're going to right away be able to talk to you about the transferable skills, the learning objectives, how the program's set up, how they deliver training. And that's what we want to know. We want to know all about them before we tell them all about us, because we want to find out if we want to do business with them. Because often they want to take, no, I shouldn't say often, but sometimes they just want to take the program and then shut us out and do their own thing. Well, that's not in integrity with Toastmasters International, and that's not what we want to have happen, because then we have rogue programs that are saying that they're Toastmasters and they're not. So there's all kinds of things that happen out there, and they get morphed. I was involved with the attempted a charter of a corporate. It was created as a club, and when I went on as a late appointed mentor to that club, I got in and I attempted to move it over to a program, and I went to talk to the sponsor internally, their executive sponsor, and he liked it just the way it was. And they eventually refused to work with Toastmasters, and then said, within 6 months, didn't pay dues and said, we're just going to have a public speaking group. So they literally sat around for half an hour once a week on work time and talked. And I said, take my name off this. I cannot be I'm not in integrity. I can't support this and be part of it. So yeah, we have to manage it, and Toastmasters needs to be business people about our program.
Yes, it almost, I'd never even thought about this, but obviously some cases where in finding out about a potential new program from a new company, that there are situations where you actually might say, no, our program would not really thrive or fit in that situation.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's just like the club votes a member in for a reason. Do they fit? Will they support the dynamic? Will they work the program? Are they willing to explore the Toastmasters promise and be in integrity and be a fully functioning member? If they're not, then you probably don't want to vote them in and have that disruptive energy in your club.
Thank you very much. We still have 5 minutes, no, 2 or 3, 4, 5 minutes to take any more questions. And I noticed that Sultan Kuz has just joined the course, and she's an area director in Cambridge with AstraZeneca Club that is taking a very long time to reach charter strength. And I wonder if she's got any questions. You could type them into the question box, Sultan. Another question come in from Elizabeth, the club quality chair. Having mentors and coaches are critical to success. What training does Toastmasters provide?
Well, for corporate programs, in my opinion, none.
Elizabeth, you can be first. You can develop it.
So really, they need to know, in my opinion, but of course I wrote the book, but they really need to know and understand what a corporate program is and what you do and do not do when you go in. So imagine a area director going in to a corporate program who has only been in a club, and they walk in and they go, well, you didn't call the meeting on time, there was whatever it might be. It's not going to look the same, because it's going to be run like a training program. It might not look like a meeting, or on the other hand, it might look very much like a meeting that they've experienced. But if they ask questions like, what are you doing to get membership? Well, that's an irrelevant question for a corporate program. How are you advertising? Irrelevant. We're working with the corporation. The corporation has that responsibility. We have the responsibility to ensure the integrity of the program and the proper unique delivery method of it. That's why we're there. On the other hand, the corporation's responsible for sending their people to training, just like they would for conflict resolution or project management or how to operate Microsoft. So that is the partnership that we're dealing with. And so we need to train our area and division directors to expect something different, as well as the district leaders, because when you look at those area and division reports, what are you seeing? You're going to see something very different.
Yeah.
And then you would also be asking them to do different things. So I think it's very challenging and exciting, because it's like, get all the team together and get everybody on the same page if they're going, or at least those that are going into the corporate.
Okay, excellent. I think we're nearly at the end, but I've got one question that's in the back of my mind.
Okay.
and this is Club
Okay.
Growth Director speaking here, and that is, I often start to get a feeling that some of my prospect corporate clubs, and even some of the possibly the slightly struggling established clubs, that within those organizations they have never really articulated the value that they bring and had that recognized sufficiently high up in the organization. And this could be a particular case where we've attempted to start a club from a middle junior technical manager who's a member of Toastmasters club in town, and he's tried to grow it from the base up, but it's never really quite won over the senior management team. So one of the projects I've got is that there's a e-value selling package that was rolled out to club growth directors, and I'm going to see if it's possible to try to extend that to the members in particularly the club leads, to see if we can start to get some value selling going in a few tricky situations.
Well, and what I would say to that, Daniel, from over here is that I don't care where it starts, how I get in the door. If somebody's there as a Toastmaster in that organization that opens the door, fantastic. But what I want them to do when I come in as a trained liaison, selling a program, not Toastmaster Club, but a Toastmaster program, forgetting everything I know about Toastmasters, that I want to talk to the person that's running the training. I'm selling a Toastmaster club. I'm selling a Toastmaster curriculum to the training department. Okay. It's a very different beast. And so I don't opens the door. I want to talk to the person that is qualified to sign the contract to bring our curriculum in, and who agrees to the terms that we have, that they must maintain 25 members in that program at all times, that they must pay the tuition fees when they're due, that they must remain current integrity with their partner, which is us, Toastmasters International, to be able to deliver that program. And at the moment that they fail out of partnership with us, we withdraw the program. So it's a lot more cut and dried and a lot less hand holding than we tend to do in our communities, which is totally justified and gives us instant credibility in the corporation, because I go in the corporate 20 years old. We currently have 355,000 students in the program at this given day. We're in 193 countries, or 143 countries currently. I mean, we have instant credibility as an education organization, but we really need to mind shift that this is all about education. This is all about developing communicators and leaders through an experiential learning program in the corporate world.
That's
so I hope
useful.
I've challenged you today.
Yeah. Well, look, on behalf of all of us, and in particular John Cox, the District Director, many thanks, Pat. This has been very useful. And the final question that just snuck in over the line was from, I'm going to struggle with the Irish, but Padraig, it looks like, who has just established the Bank of Ireland Club in Dublin only a fortnight back. And his question was, can Toastmasters do more on platforms like LinkedIn to promote itself? I can half answer that, because internationally we are pushing forward a digital marketing campaign based on the LinkedIn platform. And there's going to be a really big pilot going on in France this year. We were given an opportunity to get involved, but we still feel we need to do more research in District 71 because our geography is split by the Irish Sea, so it would be quite hard for us in the first instance to put together an optimal marketing strategy based on geographic filters. So that's just a question that cropped in.
I think I'm pretty old-fashioned. I think there's nothing more powerful than a personal introduction. And I mean, if you have personal introductions, those are hot leads because you can get in the door. Otherwise, you're dealing with cold leads. And an interest, you can see something on LinkedIn, but it doesn't mean anything. It takes nothing to click I like this or respond, I want to know more. And it can really suck a lot of time where there's really no possibility of that going anywhere. So, if Toastmasters International is running it, which I understand is their intention, that's fabulous. But when at a district level, I know when I was at district level how limited my resources in terms of time and energy were. And so really looking at, is that the best place for me to put my time and energy? Is that where I'll get the best return? And so it might be that you create a team that does that if you've got lots of resources. Yeah.
Anyway,
I just want to say I wish you all the best in this initiative, and I know the greatest challenge is to forget what you already know about Toastmasters and think corporate. Imagine yourself sitting in the chair as the leader responsible for all the training and development of the employees in that corporation, and ask yourself what you would really want from Toastmasters so that you could justify it to the chief executive officer and your budget officers. And I think that it'll get you close to what I've discovered doing that. I also want to say that if people have questions, certainly you're free to reach out to me. I think that Daniel has my email, and you can share that. And if you do reach out to me in email about questions past your district, please put in the subject line that it's about corporate programs, because I get a lot of spam.
Okay. Well, once again, on behalf of us all in District 71, and especially those that are working on corporate programs, thank you very much, Pat, for your time. Well, this morning for you, tonight for us, and yeah. we as a district will no doubt keep in touch as our situation develops, hopefully positively into the future.
Fantastic. I look forward to further interactions, and I wish you all the very best. And again, thank you so much for the honor of chatting with you about corporate programs.
Right. Well, I'm going to close the call down now, and thank you all very much for your time.
Thanks, everyone.